we started looking at the project life cycle last week, and we began with the first phase, which is the project initiating phase or project initiating stage, right? So 2 weeks ago, I told us I have 5 stages or 5 phases in project management. When you have to manage a project and you have to go through the traditional method of managing a project, or the one we call the waterfall, the predictive method or approach of managing a project. There are 5 stages or phases you are going to go through before you end the project. So we started last week with the first one, and you were given assignments. So just a recap, we said there are 6 questions you need to ask when you are performing activities in that particular phase or stage. Can we remind ourselves on what those 5 questions are? What's the first question? Anyone? What's the first question?
The why question.
Okay.
Why?
The why question. What's the second?
Who?
Who? The who question.
Who question?
Okay. There was a third.
The what question.
Excellent. What's the fourth one?
The when question.
Okay. This fifth one.
The where question.
And then the last one.
The how.
Excellent. Well done, Damilola, and others who have spoken. That's excellent. Let's take it a step further. When you're asking the why question, what exactly are we asking? Anybody? If we say the why the project, what exactly are we asking? What are we looking at there?
The purpose of the for initiating the project and the objective of why you initiated the project. That's it.
Excellent. So you understood last week that before anything, you must understand the project objectives. You must understand the purpose. Why exactly? You must be able to ask that question. Whoever the project sponsor or the performing organization is, you must be able to ask them that question. Why are we going to do this project? Or why are we doing this project? Why do I need to manage this project? So that answers the question of why. And whatever your findings are becomes your project objective, becomes the purpose of the project. Then the second question, which is the question of who, what exactly are we asking here? What are we asking?
The question is who is the work being done for? Like who is going to sponsor the projects? Who is the clients?
Yeah.
I think
that's correct.
We're talking about the stakeholders.
Correct. So we are talking about the project stakeholder. So all the who's that you will evaluate on the project, all the persons, either the project sponsor, either your project team, or you yourself, the organization, the community, everybody that are involved, all the humans that are involved on the project are the question that who answers. You need to identify them. So we call them is a body, or it's a collection of persons, a group of people, set of people that you find on the project. They are the ones we call project stakeholders. So that answers the question. So you must know those people who are going to be the customers, the end users, the beneficiaries, the people that the project will impact on, the outcome of the project is going to directly impact on, or inversely, that they are also going to have an impact positively or negatively on the project. So those are the people you need to try and find out. So there are activities that you will perform. By the time we get there, you will see. So when you're going through these processes, as you're asking those questions, there are ways by which you need to identify them, you need to analyze them, you need to plan on how you're going to communicate with them, and then how you're going to monitor and then proceed on. Okay, so the fourth question, third one, the question of what? What exactly are we asking here? The question of what? What are we asking? Someone who hasn't spoken. Fazia. What question are we asking when we say question of what?
For what we are talking about the I think the scope of the project and the things we intend to deliver, the deliverables of the project and the scope of the project.
Excellent. I mean, what exactly do we have as a business here? Just like from the one we have been emphasizing, the essence of our setting up this mentorship is not just because we are jobless. And even if I'm jobless, God forbid, Engineer Tawo is not jobless. Rihanna is not jobless, and other mentors are going to interact with you are not jobless. So there is exactly deliverables that we are set out cutting to achieve here. So our objective are within certain frames of what we call scope. So there are meaning that there are limits to what we are going to do to you or with you during this set period of time. So that's exactly what means. What exactly, so that you can be focused. What it enables. Sorry, my network logged me off just briefly. I hope you can hear me. I'm back. Kindly confirm if you can hear me.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. So invariably, we are talking about you determining the scope of what you are going to achieve, and then the set of outcomes, the products that you are mandated, right, to deliver on the project in order to satisfy the requirements. So that answers the question of what. What about when? This is just straightforward. The question of when, what are we talking about? What question are we asking here? Anyone? The question of when, what are we talking about?
Okay, it talks about like the timeline of the project, when you intend to start and finish the project.
Excellent. Excellent. Then the fifth one, the question of where. What does it talk about? What are we referring to? Where?
The location where the
Okay.
project is happening.
Excellent. So we're talking about location where we behave well today. So the final one talks about the question of how. And this how is going to be where we will now transcend into the next phase. Because when you're able to establish the how, then you can move into the next phase. And the how talks about the method, the approach that you want to use to manage the project. And that has to be determined by you. What method you're going to deliver the project to, right? So that moves us to the second phase, which is project planning. Project planning. Please confirm if you can see my screen. So we want to talk about project planning. Can you all see my screen? Okay. Okay. So what exactly are we doing here? When we are talking about project planning, this is exactly where you need to establish in clear terms what the scope of the project is. And in establishing what the project scope is all about, you need to document it. Don't forget, I told you from day one that documentation is the lifeblood of project management. And you know what blood is to our body system is exactly what documentation is to project management. Imagine project management being an embodiment of life. So what supplies life to the entire body in project management is what we call documentation. So we need to create a document on scope in order for us to be able to have something to take in as an input to begin our planning on. And what we are the kind of documents that you prepare in analyzing your scope to understand exactly. My network has been pulling me in and out. I'm so sorry about that. And let's see how we can actually manage it. So project scope statement is exactly what we are going to start with and look at how this is going to impact the entire project planning process. I want to teach us, I don't know whether we've mentioned this before now, but let me just teach us a little secret about managing projects under the predictive waterfall, or the one we call, okay. I know I was logged off again. Please let me know if you are hearing me. Okay. So I want to tell us a secret, and the secret is just in form of an acronym, and it is called ITTO. 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 That's a secret. To manage a project and go through any of the phases in project management under the predictive traditional method or the waterfall. All these names are the same. They are just different nomenclatures. If you say traditional method, you say predictive, you say waterfall, they all mean the same thing. So we are talking about the old ways defined and established in managing projects. So because it takes a sequential way, it takes a gradual way of achieving your project objectives. Okay, so there is a secret behind using this method in order for you never to go wrong, and that secret is what we call ITTO or ITTO. ITTO is an acronym. I stand for input, T stand for tools, the second T stands for techniques, and then the O stand for outputs. So inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. ITTO. Never forget it. Very, very important. Never forget it. ITTO. That's a secret. But because of the generation in which we are living in now, we've added another T to the middle. So we now have ITTO. So we have inputs, tools, techniques, technology, and outputs. ITTTO. So that's what we're dealing with, and that's the simple way by which you can understand how to facilitate, as a project manager, all the processes using the predictive or the waterfall or traditional method in project management. So let's now apply that concept, Chris, to this planning phase and see. So what here now is your input. An example of your input when you want to do project planning is your project scope statement. Okay? And what exactly do we mean? For you to be able to understand what the scope of a project is, you must have established certain information when you are initiating the project. Don't forget, we talked about project objective. Excuse me. We talked about project objective. We talked about you determining who the stakeholders are when the project timeline is. That's your schedule. When is it starting? When is it finishing or closing? So all of this information are documented in a particular document, which now becomes a major input when you want to go into your plans. Remember the assignment you did last week is for you to produce a document we call project charter. Okay, because a project charter is a document that mandates and authorizes a project manager to act and perform on a project as a project manager. So when you don't have a project charter, it's as good as you are illegal managing a project. What authorizes a project manager to manage a project is the document we call project charter. So usually when a project is initiated or at the initiation phase, the project sponsor or the performing organization will authorize a project manager, appoint a project manager, authorize a project manager by issuing a project charter, because the project charter will stipulate the level of authority and all these other information that I'm talking about, the project objective, your deliverables, or the basic outcome. Then the requirements that you need to satisfy in order for the deliverables at the end of the day to be accepted. Then you also have the project timeline. Sometimes you even have them state the budget inside that project charter. Then you have a list of your project stakeholders. They will mention some project key stakeholders in the document, that project charter. Then they will mention the location. You remember those 6 questions. They will answer some of them inside that. So what the assignment you did last week is an example, a simple example of a project charter. It's just that it's not elaborate. There are some other information that we did not document in that project charter, which as time goes on, you begin to see how to build on it. So now we want to start project planning. You need to bring in that document as part of your input, your project charter. Then another example of input document you bring in into planning phase is what we call your business case document. Because the business case document is a document that shows the business analysis of the organization or the project sponsor and what informed the decision on selection of that particular project. Because every project objective must align with the organizational vision, the organization's vision, or the organization's strategic objective. I hope you are following. Every project that you are performing must necessarily, the project objective must necessarily align with the strategic objective of the performing organization or the client or the project sponsor. Imagine you are a wedding planner and you want to plan a wedding for 2 people who are planning to get married. Okay, that is a project. There is an objective, strategic objective of these 2 people, the couples. You will take the brief from them. The price of taking the brief is you establishing your project charter, and then use that to now prepare your project scope statement. And don't forget, location, timing, all of these 6 questions will be answered. Who are the people? Who are the guests? You know, what method are you going to use to manage the wedding planning and also execute the wedding eventually? So this is an example of you having an input into your planning phase before you now go deep into planning. Okay, so That answers the question of knowing the inputs, the document, the right document that you need to bring in. Imagine if you did not sit the two couples, the guy and the fiancé who wants to get married. You don't sit them down to understand strategically what intentions, what their vision for the wedding is. You know, you've gone ahead to take a template, or maybe you even done other wedding plans before or planning before. Chances are that you may want to repeat the same thing and think that that will suit them. At the end of the day, if there's no alignment with what you're planning to do, you may not meet, your outcome may not meet their expectations. And once the expectation of your clients, your stakeholders are not met, that means that the project has failed. So you see reasons why at the end of the wedding planner and the couples usually fight. They're like, no, you didn't do everything we asked you to do, or you didn't satisfy us, we're not satisfied. Oh, our guests were not happy, blah, blah, blah. So it's the same way you manage a project. And it's all across this different skills or dimension of projects. So I just use this wedding planning as an example. You can take any project as a scenario to see how this thing works. You must understand the objective of your clients or the organization, and when you are clarifying or analyzing the project objective, it must be in strict alignment with that strategic objective. Then you prepare your scope document. So one of the activities you're going to perform under your planning is for you to create your project scope statement document. Because when you create it, then you will use that statement document to prepare your project management plan. And let me just say here quickly that your major outputs, don't forget, still using ITTTO, ITTO. Your major output from the planning phase is your project management plan document. That's the major output. That's associated with this, because you're going to be creating, like you have created your project scope statement now is a document. You have many other documents you're going to be creating. A communication plan document, your risk management plan document, your stakeholder management plan document, your procurement management plan document. You're also going to create your team charter, so many other project documents you're going to be creating. Your minutes of meetings, you're going to create it in the process of facilitating the process of planning. So all of these, in whole, the major document that becomes a major output is your project management plan document. Because in predictive, without your project management plan document, you cannot proceed on to start executing. Okay, so we'll see. So if you want to define what a project scope document is, you say it's a document that clarifies the detailed information that you have documented in your project chart. The detailed information, all those 6 questions that you have answered. So your scope document clarifies that. It breaks it down into relatable information, right? That will be useful for you to now create a project plan. Because without you understanding your project charter and those 6 questions, it will be difficult for you to facilitate the process of planning. Because what exactly are you going to plan on? If you don't understand how long the project has been approved to run, it might be difficult for you to set a realistic time. Using even SMART goals, right? It might be very, very difficult. If you don't know what level of resources has been budgeted, how much has been allocated for the project, it might be very difficult for you to do your cost management plan, to prepare a cost management plan, and even be able to determine how you are going to address issues that is associated with risk management. So this is exactly what you do when we are talking about project planning. Let's see again. When you are writing or developing or creating a scope statement, there are certain things that you need to understand. Number one, you need to determine, don't forget I told you we are using predictive method and approach. So here, the process by which you want to carry out the work and execute your work has to be in a sequential form, a linear process. It has to be a linear process, meaning that if you don't do one, you can't do the other. And then if you don't do the other, you cannot do the next. So that is what we mean by sequence, following a pattern, a linear pattern of execution. So it is here on that you will determine how the sequence, that's what we do in planning. You want to determine the sequence of the performance of the work will be attained with the view that you want to completely deliver all your deliverables and then satisfy your client. So this is where you will justify the sequence and determine the sequence by which you want that work to be done. And like I said, there are tools and there are techniques, there are technology that you can deploy, that you can use for you to be able to determine this when you are creating your scope statements, documents, and then other documents that we're going to see that you need to determine. Then by the time you are looking at the process of determining the sequence, you need to put into consideration what we call project constraints, because there are factors both within or outside of the business that will necessarily affect process of you executing the project. We call them project constraints. They are called factors that would affect the project positively or negatively. Generally, we have the one we call triple constraints. There are three. Okay, the first one is what we call project scope itself. Project scope. Scope is a limiting factor. Then the second one is schedule, project schedule or time. The third one is cost, project cost or budget. These are the triple constraints. So when you hear about project triple constraint, this is what we mean. We are talking about project scope, project time or schedule, and project cost or budget. However, there are so many other limiting factors and constraints, which I would like us to just some of the examples. What are those limiting factors that you think can affect the way you are going to sequentially execute a project successfully? How you want to, sequence your activities to successfully achieve all your deliverables on the project. Can you give us some examples? You can unmute. What are the other examples or other factors that you think can affect a project? Anyone?
So I
You can
think,
unmute. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, sir.
yeah, so I think the people you are working with and like the clients, the person that is funding the project, if for example the money is not coming as at when it's supposed to come, it further delays the project. Also, if the person you are working with is maybe a little bit problematic and is changing what you need to do, those things can affect the project timeline.
Okay, so you said, so I'm going to now translate people to mean stakeholder. So stakeholder can be a limiting factor, can be a project constraint. Okay, Friday, I see your hand up.
Yeah,
what limiting
yes,
factor
sir.
do you
I
want to
was
tell
going
us?
to I was going to say the labor and the material involved might serve as a constraint to the project, because when dealing with projects, man, which is the labor, and the material is as important as the project cost and schedule.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. So you see, you just need to think outside the box. Excellent. So, but rather than using labor and material, in project management, we call this group of, and we call it resources. So resources is an example of limiting factor. So the resource here, we are not talking about cost. We are not talking about break, because that's already a limiting factor, a major triple constraint, part of the triple constraint. So we'll talk about resources as part of equipment, materials, and exactly what Friday had posted for us. So that's very correct. So let's not forget, we have stakeholders, we have resources. Yes, Emmanuel. Then after that, Gideon. Emmanuel, you can unmute.
Okay, sir. So I think any dependent and independent variables can be a constraint to the project, positively or negatively.
Okay, so what are the examples of those variables? You have to be specific. What are the examples of the variables?
Okay,
Or what
as
do you mean by
it's
variables?
okay, let me say environmental factors, because in some companies, let's use for instance Julius Berger, before they could operate in some country, they have to make some sacrifices and some laws that is against that policy. So all these are variables that can delay the project or can hinder it from being um fulfilled.
Okay, excellent. So, that's why I had to probe further for you to be able to use that word. So you have mentioned it, environmental factors. And there are so many examples of environmental factors that you can identify. But let me just keep it in the cooler. We'll still come back there when I'm trying to do a summary of all these limiting factors. Yeah, Gideon, go ahead.
Yes, we also have market dynamics. If the market changes, then it is definitely going to affect the project as well.
Excellent. Excellent. That's another wonderful example of limiting factors. Market dynamics. We call it economic factors. The economic factors. Thank you. Julius, I see your hand up. And on mute.
Yeah, I would say government regulation and political instability can actually impact the
Mm,
project too.
mm. That's another important limiting factor. And it seems to be even more prominent and more pronounced in this part of the world where we have political instability and, well, I don't want to say bad governance, but poor leadership, right? So political factors are very, very critical. So see, the reason why I'm asking us, Susan, I'm going to ask you to mention yours now. The reason I'm asking us to mention it is so that we can see how relatable these factors are. They are right there, always around us. But the question is, it depends on the level of your competency as a project manager for you to be able to put all of these into consideration when you are determining how you want to plan your project. Because if you don't consider all these inexhaustible factors, I mean, they are inexhaustive. So if you don't do due diligence for you to be able to identify them before you drive into planning, you will have planned poorly and then you see the poor performance of the project. So Susan, over to you. Let's have your own example of limiting factor. Oh, proceed on. Can you hear me, Susan? I stand up. Okay. So let's proceed. So, I mean, these examples. So now generally, you can categorize all these factors into two major categories, apart from the three, the project triple constraints. You can classify them under internal factors. Internal in the sense that they are within the control of the performing organization. They are within your control. So it's internal to the organization. Then you now have external factors, which are external and outside of the control of the organization, performing organization. So all of these examples we've mentioned, political factors, market instability or economic factors, we talked about environmental factors. All of these are examples of external factors. Because an organization alone, even if they wedge that kind of political power, cannot simply determine the political dimension or political of a nation or of an environment where project is being conducted or performed. As a matter of answering the question of where. Then your environmental factor, we all know what climate change and cool and all of that is, right? Seasons and times are changing with change in climate. And it seems as if sometimes we have less of rainfall, more of harmattan, less of harmattan, more of rainfall, and all of that. So all of these you have to put into consideration when you are determining the sequence by which work has to be performed. And again, if you are talking about sequencing a project, we are talking about you, first of all, identifying all the detailed in a form of breaking down the details of each of the activity that you need to perform, each of the tasks you need to perform on a project, cumulatively, for you to be able to achieve all your deliverables on the project. So that's exactly what we are talking about when you are defining and breaking down your scope into relatable work activities. Okay. And when you want to do this, you don't do it in silo. You don't perform these activities in silo, meaning that you don't do it alone as a project manager. You have to work together with your project team members, because it is assumed that starting this planning phase, you will set up your project team, and there's a process of setting up your project team. Last week we looked at it, the process of 2 weeks ago we looked at it, the process of team development, where all these things you do under initiation phase. So it's assumed that you already set up your team, you've onboarded them, and here you create your team charter, and everybody signs the team charter, which shows the ground rules, the rules of engagement, how you plan to engage the team members, and the method at which you want to work together. So silo is never going to be an effective way of managing a team. You don't work alone. I don't know how many of us are Liverpool fan here. I think it's Liverpool anthem that says we never walk alone and all of that. Sorry, I don't know it because I'm not a Liverpool fan, right? So it is also the practice in project management that you don't work alone. And the work we are talking about here is you don't perform tasks in any of the processes. You don't perform the tasks alone. You have to effectively engage and utilize your team members. And you don't only do that, you also have to work together with strategic stakeholders. There are certain stakeholders that need to be involved in your planning phase. You need to determine them. You need to identify them. You need to analyze them. At what point in time you need to bring them in for them to also have their say and participate in the process, so that your planning process will not fail. Because there are stakeholders that have much influence and they are well positioned on the project, and you leave them out of your planning phase, that means that your planning will fail. They will not approve your planning. But when you get them involved from the beginning to the end of the planning, you have their buy-in, then the planning process will be successful. And when you perform this planning activity, you need to update your project charter. Peradventure, anything changes, any information changes inside your project charter. For instance, maybe in the process of analyzing your scope and breaking it down into relatable work activities using your work breakdown structure, right? You determine, you establish that, your project that was specified to be for 3 months, realistically using SMART goals, is now going to take 5 months. Maybe you are going to extend it by two months, right? You need to update and revalidate your project charter, right? And then you archive it. So when you are making this change, you have to go through the process of reviewing your project charter. We call it process of change control. You have to ensure that you get an approval. You don't just arbitrarily go and just review any document in project management. It must be approved. It must be approved, and you only update after you have obtained approval. So if you realize that the timeline that's been given to you is an impossible mission and you are not Tom Cruise, right? Even Tom Cruise will still have to receive validation in order for him to be able to determine whether there are resources enough allocated for this project that is mission impossible to be accomplished, right? So once you determine new reviews that need to be done on your input document, your project charter, and all of that, then you need to get an approval. Once it's approved, then you review it and then communicate it to all stakeholders. So this is the process you have to follow, and you can imagine the sequence. So one comes after the other. That's what we mean by sequence. If this is not done, that cannot be done. And if that is not done, and this is not done, then the project will fail. So look at this triangle. When I was explaining to you the other time, this triple constraint, this is exactly how it looks like. within the triangle. Okay, so it's a triple constraint because each of these limiting factors forms a pivoted end of the project. If anything happens on the time, it will directly affect the cost. If anything happens on the cost, it will directly affect the scope. If anything happens on the scope, it will directly affect the time. So you can see that all intertwined. Something happens to one, it has a direct impact on the other two, and vice versa. And it goes like that. So that's why they are very, very important. I know when we're measuring other limiting factors, we didn't mention quality, but it's very, very important as well. Project quality. Then we also have sustainability, which is part of the environmental factor. So these are things that you need to put into consideration and always put on the table for discussion anytime you are planning a project, regardless of what the project is. All of this must come to bear. If the focus of your planning is that you want to plan to succeed, you must plan putting your project constraints under consideration, critical consideration, and see how you want to mitigate the impact that any of the constraints may have. And that brings us to talking about risk management. Management is part of the knowledge area you need to apply from your initiation phase till the closing of the project, because you will always see the occurrence of risk and issues all throughout your project. In fact, each of these limiting factors that we have mentioned and some that we have not mentioned in itself have inherent in itself risk that's associated with them. There are risks associated with time, there are risks associated with cost, there are risks associated with quality, with scope, there are risks associated with your environment, associated with politics, risks associated with sustainability issues, risk everywhere. So you need to also plan on how you are going to respond to risk by first of all identifying what these risks are. What are these risks? So you have to do risk identification. Then you have to analyze the risk, right? And document this risk by creating your risk register. Then under this planning, you will now plan on how you want to respond to the risk. Should the risk occur, how do you want to respond to the risk? Any question? If anybody has any question, did you follow me through up to this point? Don't forget, we are talking about planning, project planning. Did you follow up to this point? Okay, Sandra, I can see your hand. Emmanuel, I can see your hand. Sandra, please, you can go first. Before I take Emmanuel, ask a question or comment.
No, I wanted to react. That's a mistake.
Okay. What about you, Emmanuel? Is there a question or also a reaction?
Hello, sir. Is a question, sir?
Okay, please go ahead. I can see Friday's hand up too. So after you, Friday. Yeah, go ahead, Emmanuel.
Okay. Please, sir, sorry is there any notes for this class? Because I didn't follow up from the beginning. So to catch up, I don't know if there's a PDF for it.
Yes, there is a material for this class. So after today, you are going to get the material for the first day up till today. You're going to get for the pre-session, you're going to get for session 1 and session 2. So you are going to get all the materials up to this planning phase till today for all of you that are in class today. Is that taken?
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
Yes,
sir.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, you're welcome. Friday, your question or comment?
All right. Thank you, sir. So you were talking about risk management and you just like scan through it. Like, can you like give us like a detailed explanation of what risk management entails? Because I got it up to the point of that point where you said analyze risk by creating risk register. So, sir, can you please give us another like a detailed explanation as to what we mean by risk management? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you for that question. I will be brief about it, even though it's not the scope of the discussion today. But because we are mentioning it in passing, I told us from the very first class that risk management is something you are going to perform throughout the project life cycle, from your initiation down to closing, because risk will always occur at different stages of the project. There are risks associated with the activities you are performing. Initiation phase, here in planning, when you move to execution, when you are doing monitoring and controlling, and then when you are closing, there are risks everywhere. Just like life in itself is a risk. Okay. So what do we call, how do we define risk? Risk is the likelihood that something will occur. And when you're talking about something that will occur, a negative thing, of course, like an issue will occur that will negatively impact the project. However, if you are competent enough as a project manager and you are able to perform effective risk management on a project, you can turn that likelihood, the chances of that event happening to have negative impact, and turn it around to be a positive impact on the project. So it's the reason why you are learning how to be a competent and certified project manager, because it's not all risk in life that are negative. It's just like when you say not all failures make someone there are some failures in life that will be like how do I put it now, like a springboard. Like I can't remember the leader of US that said it, that if you have never failed before, you are never a leader. So when you have failed, you learn through your failure and then excel. Like was he Faraday or Albert Einstein that conducted an experiment 99 times before he actually succeeded, right? So this is exactly what risks posted for us or projects. The fact that a risk, the likelihood of something negative happening, does not necessarily mean that the negative thing will happen. But if you are able to manage it effectively using the right tools, the right techniques, and you plan adequately on how you want to mitigate it, chances are that you will turn that negative impact into positive impact and make it to have a desirable effect on the project. So this is what risk management is all about. I'm now telling you that when you want to perform risk management of the project, it has its own processes. This knowledge area has its own processes. The first process is you have to first of all identify what these risks are. And I will give you a very good example. Since we have been using wedding planning, I hope there is no one among you that is planning to get married before leaving school. That's just on a lighter note. Right? So imagine someone that is planning a wedding planner, and you want to now identify the risk associated with wedding planning. What would be those risks? Can we give examples? Gideon, I will recognize you after this. Can we give examples of risks associated with wedding planning? Anyone? Based on all the limiting factors that we talked about, what are the risks associated with wedding planning? Have we
Okay,
weddings where
wedding
we're even pitying the couples that this wedding, they don't build. So what are the
yes,
risks associated with wedding planning?
well, one of the risks will be limited budget. Yes,
Aha.
limited
So
financial.
cost is one of the risks, like insufficient funds, right? So when money runs out, what happens? That's a major risk. It can lead to disappointment, to disreputation and all of that. That's a very good one. So just imagine you are performing risk management and you are doing risk identification on this project called wedding planning. So, and you are the process of identifying, so you just list it. Number one, insufficient fund. So you quickly identify, these two couples, they don't have enough money. So that's a risk. Because if you don't identify it, chances are that you fail at your planning and your project. So that's good. Sandra, you want to say something? Or was it Esther I saw? I saw someone's hand up. Women that are here, you attend weddings now. You help either your siblings or your friends that have done weddings before. What are those risks that you identified when you were participating in wedding planning?
Like I would say location.
Aha! So you see now, location. venue. So venue can also be a risk, right? So you want to be sure that and you have to even break it down in the venue. What are the other risks? Do they have electricity? Do they have generator? Do they have a backup pass? Then what's the ambience level of decoration is required to be done within that particular venue, and do they have money to be able to do? I mean, so you can imagine this is what goes into identifying risk on any project, and you have to do that due diligence, exhaustively identify all the necessary risks associated. So in identifying, you are creating a risk register. That's what we call a risk register. There's a template for that. You have to create all the list them one by one, and then you document them in the register. Okay, before you now go and analyze each of the risks, because in analyzing you want to know exactly what the content of each of these risks. The venue, what exactly is the problem around the venue that can pose threats and have negative impact on the planning of the wedding and a successful wedding. So you want to identify it, you want to analyze it. Then once you move from that second phase, you are moving to the phase of, okay, so let me know how I'm going to respond to this risk. Do I need to make plan B, plan C, plan D, and all of that? So there are so many things you have to do around planning, right? You have different ways by which you can respond to risk, about 5 different ways. Then you can now create your own contingency plan and create a fallback plan. So these are what we mean by risk management, if you get what I mean. Friday, is that taking?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. I think Emmanuel or someone else raised up the hand the other time. I hope that settles it so that we can proceed. Does that settles it? Okay, so we are going to wrap up very soon, and I need to, because it's already the hour. So I want to introduce the assignments that you're going to be doing, and this is going to be done in group. We're going to do this in group. Gideon, you can unmute before I assignment to us.
Okay, sir. I had a question. I wanted to
Please
find
go ahead.
out, how do you prioritize which constraint to focus on, last in situation where they are conflicting with each other? Like you have a decision to make and then there are different constraints to the project in different directions. For example, the scope is being affected and the quality is also being affected. How do you prioritize which one to focus on?
Okay, so when we are talking about project triple constraints, you don't prioritize triple constraints. You have to give them equal amount of attention. Because like I said, they are intertwined. Imagine remember this principle in mathematics when we talk about Venn, right? You have the entire within the Venn diagram. Then you now have some other set of elements that intersect each other. There are some that unite with each other, all subsumed within the Venn diagram. So when we are talking about all these other constraints, they are all subsumed within these triple constraints. Imagine if anything happens to your sustainability, anything happens to your stakeholder, anything happens to your political factor, economic factor, they are all still coming back, okay, to determine the kind of impact it's going to have on your time in terms of the duration of your project. It's going to have impact on your budget, your cost. It's going to have impact on the scope, what you can do and achieve per time. That's what scope means. All these tasks you're analyzing, they are all within the frame of time and then cost. So you prioritize these triple constraints. They are all going to be treated equally because they are intertwined, they are integrated as an entity. However, all these other constraints, which are also risk related, by the time you are doing your risk analysis, that's when you will create your prioritization based on, because when you are, I don't want to go deep into this risk analysis because it's a different body of knowledge entirely, right? Which is not within the scope of what we are determining. But because of the question, When you are doing your risk analysis using different tools, techniques, and technology to analyze your risk, which you have identified in your risk register, you are going to determine the level of impact. Is it going to be high? Is it going to be low? Right? You are going to determine the level. So if you have a risk that is at high risk, definitely you have to prioritize it above a low risk or a medium risk. So you have scale by which you can prioritize the impact of a risk. Maybe using a scale of 5 or a scale of 3. Okay, that's one of the methods. That was one of the approaches of analyzing impact, probability impact analysis. You can analyze it. The likelihood that this is going to occur, is it going to be high impact? Is it going to be low impact? Is it going to be medium impact? So once you do that analysis, then you can easily know which one to prioritize and how to now, allocate resources to ensure that, because if an high risk happen, that means that it can automatically shut down the project and cause the project to fail. But a low risk, you might still have time on the project to still see the way it's going to perform, and then go a long way to see whether it's really going to impact the project negatively or not. I'll give you a very good example. I'll wrap up the thought of that. Still talking about this wedding issue. An example of a high risk is if rain is going to fall. Now you see what I mean. If rain is going to fall on wedding day, you've checked the climatic condition and it is 100% certain. When you check the climatic condition, they give in percentages the chances of rain, the likelihood of rain occurring or falling on a particular day. They'll say 20%, 80%, 5%. If you see anything 80% and above, the likelihood is high, very high. So that's a high risk. So you want to plan in such a way that even based on budget, you don't want to use an open venue. You don't want to use a venue that is not concealed, that is not protected from rain. Otherwise, it can mess up the whole thing. I don't even want to, because a high risk, you have to look at the wind direction, blah, 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 and all of that. If you just use a tent that is covered, what if wind blows it out? So this is how you analyze the risk to determine, whether it is low, the one that is high, you have to prioritize and ensure that you need that. And this has nothing to do with whether it is about, or is about cost or time, or is going to have element of all of this in it. Once you are dealing with risk, there's time associated with you responding to risks, there's cost associated with you responding to risks, and there's definitely going to be some aspect of the project in terms of your scope that is going to be associated with those risks, that if you don't respond effectively, those tasks, those scope elements or items can be negatively impacted. Do you understand that? Is that understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it is. Thank you very much.
Okay. So let me take Damilola, and we are going to wrap up now. It's 8 minutes past 11. I want us to wrap up now. So Damilola, go ahead with your question.
Okay, sir. I want to quickly ask this question because I saw it in the last week assignment. So I'm currently seeing it now. This user acceptance criteria. Please, can you please explain what it means, sir? User acceptance criteria.
Okay, if I get you clearly, last week you were given an assignment where you are meant to create what's it called now? You are meant to create your questions on why those 6 questions, right? And then the second one is now for you to develop your template, project charter.
Yes,
so
sir.
under the project charter, we have, that's the last item, we have the user acceptance criteria. Is that what you're asking about?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So your user acceptance, if you notice on the project charter, there's an asterisk behind, if you check very well, meaning that it is compulsory that this must be stated. It's mandatory that you determine your user acceptance. What user acceptance means is you are checking or listing out critical criteria, indispensable criteria, a must criteria that the project must fulfill if the deliverables and the outcome of the project must be accepted by the customer. user or the project sponsor. So when we are talking about user, we are talking about the end receiver, the beneficiary of the project. Those are the users. The users are also classified as example of stakeholders. So you can say the stakeholders, people that will benefit from that project. In this case now, when we are talking about the wedding planning, right? Users here are the couples and then their guests. Imagine the couples can be satisfied and their guests may not be satisfied, and they are the one that will now start backbiting or start indicting them on they were not. They did imagine we attended their wedding, we were not fed well. Me, I did not even eat anything. I didn't even taste out of the cake. Those kind of things. So you need to identify the criteria, that minimum criteria that must be satisfied, that must be fulfilled for all the deliverables, the outcome of your project to be acceptable before you can talk about project success. So this user acceptance criteria defines your definition of done and also defines your project success. So that's why it is highly important. It is very, very important. Did you get that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So whatever project you stated in your assignment, I've not gone through them. We have not gone. So never mind. Some of you notice that we have not been responding. Don't worry. We are compiling everything. We'll respond to you at a point in time at glance, and then let you know all those people that have been attending, submitting assignments. We know everybody. So by the time we share the Excel sheet of each of the weeks, those are submitted, and then give you your analysis, you will see. So please, at any point in time, if there are things you don't understand in the assignment, don't even wait till the class. You can ask in the group or reach out to any of us so that we'll be able to put you through. It's the purpose of why we are here with you, so that you can learn. And thanks for asking that question. Okay, so let's go into the assignment for today, which are going to be grouped. All of you that are here, you're going to be put into two groups. We won't have more than 2 groups. And we are expected that during the week, you find a way to collaborate. So we are now starting process of team management. So the first thing is you have to identify who is going to be your team lead. Okay, 2 groups must have a team lead each. So you within the group who is going to be the team lead, and the team lead is meant to coordinate communication on developing and creating this work breakdown structure for your group. So the assignment is you have to select a particular project, right? First of all, you create a scope statement. You create a scope statement, determine all the limiting factor. Of course, you select a particular project you want to use, okay, that you are going to adopt or accept for your group. Then you create a scope statement for that project, and then you list out 2 things. Number 1, the limiting constraints, the limiting factors to that particular project. List it out, meaning that you are creating your list of project constraints. Then second, you are going to list out your risk associated with that project. So 2 things, you are listing out the constraints, you are listing out the risk. Then finally, create the project work breakdown structure. So I'm going to share a template with you on the work breakdown structure, which you are going to use for this particular project. And everybody is meant, the 2 groups are meant to do that. You see the reason why I said those are not here in the class, they can't participate, because once you miss a class, it's very difficult for you to be able to participate in any of the classes. So I'm going to share about 4 different templates with us on Excel sheets that we can use. But let me show us just example of how these templates look like, and then we close. So this is one example of a work breakdown structure template. So you see that it has the what's it called now? The task, the project, then the project task is the project is a banquet, right? Then what are associated with that banquet project? Your planning and supervision, you have the dinner, you have the room and equipment, you have the guests, you have the staff, speakers, and all of that. Then you now have different sub-activities. So when we are talking about work breakdown structure, we are talking about it's a technique that you use in breaking down your work, your scope statement, your work packages into smaller chunks of relatable work activities. That's the meaning of work breakdown structure. It's a technique you use in planning where you break down your scope statement or work packages into relatable work activities, whereby you itemize each work one by one. So you see what we have as Roman figure 1 and 2, or 1.1, 1.2 at different levels. They shows the different level of breaking down your work into relatable work chunks. So those numbers are what we call work breakdown structure numbers. So this is an example, a work breakdown structure. Then it's work breakdown structure diagram. Then this is another example.
Sorry, sir, I
Simple
can't see
example.
anything though.
Are you serious? Please, if you can see my screen, let me know. Anybody, can you see my screen? Because I'm seeing it.
Yes, sir, we can see your screen.
Okay. Eyosa, maybe you have to leave and come back. It might be your internet. So this is another work breakdown structure. This one is actually, sometimes you have it on a Gantt chart. Okay, but we will get here next week by the time we are talking about creating a detailed project management plan. So this brings us to the end of the class today. Do you have any question? Do you have any question? And I want to believe that you all got the assignments. Of course, we are going to send the details of this question again to us. When
Sir,
the I can hear you now. Go ahead.
okay. I want to ask that how are we going to go about the group? And also our
Yes,
attendance. We've not signed today.
yes, I'm sharing the attendance now. Yes, so if you are, I see that some people are trying to leave. Please don't leave. I intentionally waited till the end so that you can take the assignment and know the assignment so that you don't run away. So just hold on a bit. I'm going to post the assignments now. I mean, the link for you to fill the attendance for week 4. And please don't share with anyone that is not here because the link is going to be closed immediately the class closes. So don't share with anybody. Otherwise, you'll be violating the rules here. Just a minute. Okay, I've gotten the link. Let me know if you can see the link. I've shared the link. Can you see the link? Okay, over. Thank you for pinning it. So please, yeah, Ufunaya, you can go ahead. You can ask a question. While Ufunaya is asking, please make sure you fill the attendance. Go ahead, Ufunaya.
All right, sir. So you were saying something about listing out the constraints. I wasn't able to hear because my network wasn't stable at that moment.
Okay, so I said, let me repeat the assignment while you are filling the form. Number 1, I said you are going to select a project. You are going to have 2 groups. You select each group will select independent projects, any project. I mean, from the definition we give to a project. Select a project, you must have a project title. Then list out, you've created a project charter last week. So I will expect that you take one of the projects you use for your project charter so that you don't have to repeat creating another project charter, right? So list out your project constraints. You must have the list of the project constraints. List it out. Those are the limiting factors of your project, apart from the people constraints. Then you also list out the risk associated with that project that you identify. What are the risks that you can identify? Have been issue on that. Then you now go ahead and create your work breakdown structure. So I said I'm going to share template with you that you can use to select whichever one that you think is best applicable to that project. So select from the template, Excel sheet, and then use it to create your work breakdown structure. Remember what I mean about work breakdown structure. You are breaking down the different activities on the project into relatable work activities. You are breaking them down one by one. So to the smallest chunk, to the smallest activity, you have to break them down according to order of priority. So that's the assignment majorly. Is that taken?
Right. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Any other question before we close now? Have you all filled the attendance? Please make sure you fill it. Please, very important. I see only 7 people have filled. Make sure you fill it. Make sure you fill it. Only people have filled. I'm refreshing the page now. Only 9 people. And I know you are up to about 15 here. Make sure you fill it so that you don't start asking that you didn't receive the correspondence. Engineer Taiwo, I don't know if you want to share anything with them as we round up before they all leave. Hello, Engineer Taiwo, are you there? Yeah, maybe he's not in a position to talk. Okay. If you have filled, you are free to leave. But please make sure you fill it, because in the next few minutes, once we close, we're going to stop receiving the attendance.